If you play a sport, it doesn't matter what level you play at, statistics show that it's likely you're going to sprain your ankle at some point. What's worse is that the study also showed that up to 47% of these ankle sprains are recurring ankle sprains, i.e. they were not a first time sprain. That suggests that once you sprain your ankle a first time, you're very, very likely to sprain it again. And if you continuously sprain it, this can lead to other foot issues such as a chronic ankle instability, and we've also seen a high rise in Achilles injuries across a lot of different sports. I'll link the article up here and in the description below. Yet we all know most athletes don't treat an ankle sprain like it's a serious injury. Most of the time they're just told to ice it and then get back to it. But if you sprain maybe your ACL, maybe not a tear, but like if you sprained it, you wouldn't just come back to playing a couple of days later. You'd treat that quite seriously because you could end up tearing it. Why don't we apply the same level of severity to the ankle? But we can't just bubble wrap ourselves and try and avoid playing completely, because every time we step onto the court, we do take that risk that an injury could occur. But the question is, how can we mitigate that risk so that we can either avoid the sprains happening in the first place or be able to rehab from them quickly enough and prehab so that it doesn't happen again? Well, the obvious thing to start with is to obviously strengthen the ankle outside of games. So when it comes to building up ankle strength outside of games, the basis should probably start with proprioception. And that's essentially just all that barefoot type of training you see. That's a lot of proprioception type of training. Proprioception is just about being able to be aware of where your body is in space. And from a foot perspective, it's about your foot being able to feel the ground. Obviously, the reason that's important is because if your foot doesn't know where it is in space and it doesn't know how to feel the ground properly, then if it goes into different positions, it may end up overextending or not doing enough, and that's what leads to an ankle sprain. So we can do different types of barefoot training. Even just walking around your house barefoot for maybe 5 to 10 minutes a day could actually increase your ability to strengthen your foot and ankle complex. Now, if you're going to start off with this barefoot training, you can't just go like from 0 to 100. So if you've never done barefoot training, you can't just decide you're going to start running every day barefoot. Start with, like I said earlier, walking in your house, maybe on a softer surface as well. Then you can progress into harder and harder surfaces. You're not necessarily going to go and start now playing your sport completely barefoot. However, what you're doing is just giving yourself that extra support so that when you do put on your shoes, then you're going to have more stability in your feet and ankles. Then part of the strengthening process could be to activate the foot and ankle complex through isometric exercises. Again, we can do these type of isometric exercises barefoot as well, because we're not really doing too much. We're not putting too much load on the foot anyway. Isometric exercises are proven to have an analgesic effect. Analgesic just means healing. So if you've previously had ankle sprains in the past, then these isometric exercises could start to heal any residual damage from those previous ankle sprains. Then obviously, if we're going to play sport, we actually need to start to get that ankle moving. So we'll go up from the isometric, where we're holding a position, to start to mobilize it a little bit with oscillations or pulses. And obviously we want to start to try and mimic the type of positions we'll see in sport. So sometimes, your whole leg might be straight, so we're going to try and mobilize it in that straight leg position, but then sometimes it might be bent and your shin angle might be forward, more of your weight might be forward, so you want to try and mobilize it there too. What this does is start to get the other muscles around the foot working, like the Achilles, so that we can start to get stronger in those areas, but also building up from the ankle first. Now, obviously, a lot of ankle sprains in sport tend to come from something external happening. So either you land on someone's foot or someone kicks your foot, and that's what causes the sprain. But there's nothing you can do to really avoid a sprain in that particular scenario. However, what you can do is get your ankles used to having external load on them, so that when it comes to healing, it might be able to heal faster than if it wasn't used to having it in the first place. Or if you were to land on someone's foot, for example, it might bounce back slightly quicker than it would if you weren't used to having external load. What that means is that if it can bounce back quicker, then you might not end up going over and then causing a break of the ankle. It might just be a minor sprain or a grade 1 or grade 2 sprain. So by doing this, you're just able to essentially give yourself the best way to recover as quickly as possible from any type of potential sprain that's out of your control. Of course, we want to make sure we're doing this in all directions so that the ankle can be ready for any type of movement it comes, and making sure that it's stable in as many directions as possible. Finally, in the training outside of a game, sports is explosive, so you want to make sure that your ankle is used to these explosive moments. Your ankle is essentially going to be the first joint that feels the floor. So if you land wrong there, it's all messed up. So you want to make sure that you train explosively too, and you can do this through the use of ankle dominant plyometrics, where Essentially, you're just trying to bounce off the floor as quickly as possible. You're not trying to have too much of a knee bend because then the force starts to spread throughout the leg. So you do want the force focused on the ankle, but obviously doing it in a safe environment. So these could look like just sub-maximal plyometrics, aka just like small jumps or skipping. And you want to do this in multiple directions as well. Now, just a quick one when it comes to using ankle supports or taping. You know, I am a big fan of using it when it comes to game scenarios, but in your training, I wouldn't suggest using these ankle supports and taping because all they're doing is essentially taking that strain off the ankle. And the whole point of the strengthening outside of games is to make the ankle stronger. So if it doesn't have any force going through it, it's not going to get stronger. But in a game, you're going to be going at max speed, max effort, max force. Things are going to be out of your control. So it's an environment where you're way more likely to have a sprain than maybe in your training sessions. So you want to use as much as you can to mitigate the risk of the sprain. So I would suggest using any sort of ankle support you can if you are prone to having sprains. But if you're not prone to it, if you don't have them all the time, then you might not need it. So if you're going to use an ankle support, then I'll suggest using one that at least mimics the kind of kinesiology tape that physiotherapists would use with professional athletes. There are these ones you can get on Amazon, which essentially look like this long band. It has this loop at the end that you can hook onto your foot, and then you wrap it around your foot in the same way that you would wrap tape around your foot, and it's reusable. So, you know, you don't have to keep on wasting tape. Now, of course, if you're trying to minimize the risk of ankle sprains during games, then when it comes to a game day warm-up, you want to make sure that you're doing what you can to warm up that ankle before the game. So you can kind of use the same system as I described earlier in terms of strengthening it outside of games. So you can start off with doing isometrics beforehand in the different joint angles, and then you can work your way up to doing those oscillations and pulses, and then doing those explosive type of movements as well. You might not do as much of the strength work because we're not trying to tire out the muscles before we get into a game. And the volume of this could be extremely low, but you know, you just want to make sure that you do enough so that the ankle feels warm and ready to go and that there's blood flow to that area. Then, you know, hopefully it all goes well in the game, there's no ankle sprains, and then you need to recover after the game. So, of course, during the season, we want to use acute recovery methods. So we can go back to what I said initially at the beginning of this video, where we were told to just ice the ankles. You know, it might be a good idea to ice them after a game because they might have some inflammation from the game. So icing will help just restrict the blood vessels around the joint, and then I would also recommend using heat afterwards to then reopen those blood vessels so that there's a rush of blood there with lots of nutrients to help repair the joint. If you're wondering how you can use ice and heat at the same time, well, I'd recommend getting another Amazon product. This is not a sponsored video, but there are these sleeves on Amazon. The one I've got is from Abco Sport, and essentially you can use this strap to wrap it around your ankle, and then inside the sleeve there is a gel pack, which is a hot cold pack. So as you can see here, it's a gel pack, hot cold pack. And you know, I've got 4 of these. 2 of them I keep in my freezer, and then 2 of them I keep out at room temp, so that the ones in the freezer I can use to ice immediately after a game, and then after that, the ones that are room temp, I can just chuck them in the microwave for, you know, like 40-45 seconds, and then I can use them for the heat afterwards. And this is just anecdotally, but I personally have found the combination of ice and heat, doing them for like 10 minutes each and having like a 5-minute break in between, has been very great. It's way more beneficial for me than just using ice on its own. And the reason I think that it's more beneficial is just because the heat allows the blood vessels to open a bit faster than if you just let your body kind of naturally defrost by itself. Also, when it comes to your training and active recovery, you might also want to add in some joint supplements. So I said this in my last video on managing knee pain, which you can check out up here in the description below. But I have this joint supplement called The Joint. It's by MyProtein, and it has UC2 collagen and vitamin C in it. Collagen is what a lot of tendons and ligaments are made up of, and vitamin C helps bind collagen to these tendons in our body. But if you don't have enough money to get this kind of supplement, because I'm not gonna lie, it's not the cheapest thing to get, then you could also use something like just having an orange and maybe some Jello, because Jello, jelly, whatever you call it, in my country call it jelly, but it has gelatin. Gelatin breaks down into collagen. Obviously, if you can't eat gelatin, then I'll suggest going for a supplement instead. And another thing, when it comes to that recovery after games, if you remember earlier in the video, I said that isometrics have an analgesic effect, which analgesic essentially means healing. So of course, we want to do isometrics, but we got to think about what we do in our daily life, right? We spend a lot of time sitting, but think about what position your feet are in. If they're in a constantly flexed position or in a constant weird position that your ankle looks strange, then you're just going to be putting a lot of strain on your ankle that's not going to be able to heal properly. So it's important to remember what positions you actually find your ankle in just in your daily life, whether you're just walking around or sitting down, and try and make sure that you utilize these times to actually make sure your ankles are strong, because essentially we're sitting down in this position for long times That's an isometric exercise, so that's an opportunity for you to heal it. Granted, there's not too much load on it, but it's in one position for an extended amount of time. So we want to make sure that it's in the right positions. Check out the description of this video below for a free vertical jump workout that you can get at www.elitesmartathletes.com. If you like this breakdown, then check out the video that's about to come up on screen now. That's all about managing knee pain during the season, and you might as well subscribe us right too. But until next time, stay blessed.